If you know a great storm is upon you, you can prepare. Mentally preparing for a shift softens its impact. This time, this season of tectonic shifts will be of a cascading nature. Not one event, but many in quick succession to help you release the rigidity around ideas, around structures, particularly ideas and structures of a hierarchical nature. Structures that are economic in nature, structures that are power in nature, structures that are interactional in nature. All of these structures will be shaken. This is ultimately good, and your mind may initially resist. Hey there, and welcome to this channeled message about a season of tectonic shifts that we are about to move into collectively. A message from my guides about some systemic changes that we're going to start seeing quite soon, as well as a little bit of information around where we're likely to see those cracks in the foundations starting to happen. And most importantly, I think the most important piece they talk about is how to navigate this time, how to move through it with as much ease and as little friction as possible. If you and I have not met before, my name is Sarah Vermont. I am a clairvoyant psychic channeler. In my normie life, I'm also a career coach. I have a little company that helps people make career changes. I've written books about careers. I've had columns at places like Forbes and Inc. and Entrepreneur. I'm a former business professor, so I have this very practical side, as well as this deeply intuitive side. And I always like to bring my practical side to my work as an intuitive. So we'll be combining those pieces together for you today. I'll be sharing this channeled message with you, and then I will return after to help you unpack it and make sense of it. I record these messages on the voice notes app on my phone, just when I'm relaxed and sitting on my couch. So you might notice a bit of a difference in the audio quality, and I'll pop a little visual over it, and then I will swing back at the end of the message and we can unpack it together. Enjoy.
A season of tectonic shifts. A season of tectonic shifts. This is the season the earth and the humans on it are moving into. This language, tectonic shift, while literal, yes, this is a part of the earth's incoming energy. But we use this word for its figurative energy, the imprint, the magnitude it represents. It represents a shift of a deeply foundational nature, foundational beliefs, foundational systems, foundational ideas, ways of being, habits. These will shift in this time. The great magnitude of this shift should not be feared. The magnitude of this shift is arriving because it is prepared. The earth is prepared. The human energy on earth is prepared, and all beings in, on, and around the earth are prepared. A momentous shift that is tectonic in nature will, yes, shape the geography of the earth differently in the coming months, in the coming years. This is happening already. This need not be feared. The tectonic nature, however, of the shifts, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, for humans, is something to prepare for. If you know a great storm is upon you, you can prepare. You can say to yourself, what would I like to release at this time? What would I like to hold on to at this time? What can I release so that it does not slow me down, bear heaviness upon my journey? Mentally preparing for a shift softens its impact. You may do such a thing now. If you understand that systems, beliefs that have been foundational are going to shift, you can question, is what I believe true? Is what I understand to be real, in fact, real? Is what I have been holding on to necessary? You will find in many cases the answer is no. A loosening, a softening, a releasing of the ways that have been will be beneficial for you now. We simply wish to prepare your mind. Your heart is prepared already. You may not think it is prepared already. We assure you, your heart is prepared. Your heart will feel relief on these changes. Your mind, however, your mind seeks rigid structures. The mind is used to rigid structures. Your heart can help your mind at this time. Your heart can ask the mind to soften. Your heart can soothe the mind, can calm the mind, can attest to the positive benefits of softening, can attest to the positive direction of this change. The change will be tectonic in nature. The change will be foundational in nature in terms of structures and systems of being, of living, things, structures you have taken for granted, structures you have given your power to without knowing you have released it, structures that are economic in nature, structures that are power in nature, structures that are interactional in nature. All of these structures will be shaken. And this is good. This is the primary message relaying. This is good. It is ultimately good, and your mind may initially resist. This is allowed. This is natural, and this can be overcome, softened, released. This can be something you grow accustomed to quickly. This time, this season of tectonic shifts will be of a cascading nature, not one event, but many in quick succession to help you release the rigidity around ideas, around structures, particularly ideas and structures of a hierarchical nature. This time, you are supported greatly. You are supported greatly by beings you are completely unaware of. You are supported by your own heart, your higher self, your team, and many teams in, on, and around the earth at this time. The earth herself supports you. Notice how the earth holds you. Even as she trembles, notice how she holds you. You are held. You will be held in this time. Hold yourself. Hold each other. This is simply a season of change, and what will arrive on the other side of this season of change is more beautiful than you could possibly imagine. We wish to remind you that you are supported during this change, so deeply supported on every level. Know that you are held. Know that you will be held.
So, lots packed into this little message. First, they talk about, this metaphor, but not quite metaphor, they're using around tectonic shifts. And they say, yeah, some tectonic shifts are going to be a part of what's happening globally in a literal sense. But they started off by saying, we really want to focus on the figurative nature. And that's why we're using this language of tectonic shifts, because this is some pretty foundational stuff that we're talking about here, of a really great magnitude. And so right off the top, it's nice to know that they're talking about the scale of this probably being something that's like not just the usual stuff that we might expect, but it's to extend their metaphor, it's some pretty earth-shaking stuff that we might be noticing is happening in the world, and we may feel a little shaken by it in the coming months. And so what they say is, when they talk about tectonic shifts, they say, we use this word for its figurative energy, the imprint, the magnitude it represents. It represents a shift of a deeply foundational nature, foundational beliefs, foundational systems, foundational ideas, ways of being, habits. These will shift in this time. So they're pretty obvious about the fact that this is not small stuff that they're talking about. But right away, they go into saying, like, listen, we are sharing this because we want you to be able to prepare mentally and emotionally for this. And they talk about the loosening of the mind. And so, as always, with most of their messages, it's meant to be a loving heads up with a bit of advice about how to move through this more gently. So they say the tectonic nature, however, of the shifts, mentally, emotionally, spiritually for humans, is something to prepare for. If you know a great storm is upon you, you can prepare. Mentally preparing for a shift softens its impact. And so they're just wanting us to be aware that some things that we're really accustomed to, systems in the world, um, there's going to be some changes there. And, I certainly believe it's true that if we do know to expect some changes somehow, for whatever reason, if we can get the mind used to that, it does soften any rigidity and resistance around that. Interestingly, they focus a lot on the mind. Like this is something that we need to prepare our minds for mostly. They say our hearts are prepared already, which I thought was really sweet. They say your heart is prepared already. Your heart can help your mind at this time. Your heart can ask the mind to soften. Your heart can soothe the mind, can calm the mind, can attest to the positive benefits of softening, can attest to the positive direction of this change. So here's what I think of when I hear that. It's almost like we can ask the heart to hold space for the mind. So, we are multifaceted beings and we can we can hold both the reality that when big changes are upon us, of course, the mind tends to freak out, right? The mind tends to spiral, move into fear and anxiety. That's just a thing that happens. It's a very human response. And there's this wiser, more connected part of us, the heart that they're talking about. Even if we don't know it consciously, there is a part of us, maybe it's the higher self, spirit, whatever you want to call it. We have this part of us that is ready for whatever changes are coming. And so what will help is to set the intention for this higher self or the wiser knowing part of you to just hold some space for the mind while the mind has its very normal, understandable responses to whatever changes are going to come forward. So that's my read on what they mean by that. And then they get more specific about what the tectonic shifts are, like what areas of life we can probably expect some changes in. So I'm just going to read that for a second. They say it's structures you've taken for granted, structures you have given your power to without really knowing that you have released it, structures that are economic in nature, structures that are power in nature, structures that are interactional in nature. All of these structures will be shaken. And I'm not surprised to hear those ones come up because they've come up in a variety of ways before in some of my previous channels. If you haven't listened to those, you're welcome to go back and listen. You'll notice the theme as well, but they're being a little more explicit here about where some of these shifts might happen. So, when I hear that, I think systems and structures of economy and finance globally, probably. I do tend to think they're talking about global stuff. Almost all of the visions and channels I receive are about global collective phenomenon. So they're talking about systems of economy and finance. I think they're also talking about systems of governance. When they talk about power, I suspect that's probably what they're talking about. They could also be talking about systems of work, the capitalist systems we're in. When they talk about systems that are interactive in nature, I sense they're talking about not like just personal interactions. I think they're probably talking about geopolitics and the way countries respond to, react to, and interact with each other. So you can see why they're using the language tectonic shifts, because these are some fairly like big systems that our societies are built upon. And if some of that is going to start changing, that is quite foundational in nature, right? Importantly, they say, this is ultimately good. So let me read back a little bit about that. They say all of these structures will be shaken, and this is good. This is the primary message we're relaying. It is ultimately good, and your mind may initially resist. So they're really honoring the fact that, like, yes, your mind is going to have a hard time with this for a little while, but it is ultimately good. And that's what they're really wanting to hammer home. They say that is what did they say? That is the primary message that they're trying to relay here. that all of this stuff that we might understandably feel triggered about is ultimately good, and we should hold it as much as we can with that kind of energy. They go on to say this sort of fear response we're going to have, it's natural and it can be overcome, softened, and released. This can be something you grow accustomed to quickly. So, this is a passage of time. As with any change, the more you integrate it, the more you get used to the idea, the less threatening it feels. And so, this is a period of time that we're moving through. And my sense is that they're talking, not just like, one event that's going to happen in a couple of weeks or something. They're talking about, when they talk about a season of something, I tend to think they're talking about something that's happening over the next 3 months, 6 months, like a chunk of time we're moving through that's probably going to feel a little prickly based on what they're saying here. And truthfully, you probably don't need me to say that. If you are someone who's energetically sensitive, you can probably feel that already, and you have probably been feeling this rising for quite some time. I know I have. They talk about how this is not just a singular event. They say it's like a cascading nature of events. So they say this time, this season of tectonic shifts will be of a cascading nature, not one event, but many in quick succession to help you release the rigidity around ideas, around structures, particularly ideas and structures of a hierarchical nature. It's interesting when I think about that. I think about a period of life I went through a couple of years ago where I kept feeling like the rug was getting pulled out from under me. And the visual I always had with that is like, I just felt like I was getting crashed against the rocks. And just as I would stand up against, I had an image of me in the ocean, just then another wave would come and knock me into the rocks again. And just as I'd rise again, along would come another wave. So it's this very destabilizing energy to it. And that's the energy I sense with this kind of a shift that we're moving through. It's not a singular event. There are going to be things that happen in succession where just as we think we're getting used to one change or one idea, something else will be thrown into the mix. And that's just something for us to have a little heads up about. Lastly, and I love that they do this, and I wish you could feel what I feel when I channel, because towards the end of the message, when they talked about how supported we were, makes me want to cry, actually. It was really beautiful energy. And, they just talk about how we are held. We are held by the beings around us. A lot of beings we're not even aware of. They talk about how we're held by the earth. I thought it was really beautiful when they just simply said, you are held. You will be held. And so with messages like this, when they're sharing some information that has the potential to feel a bit spiky, a bit scary, I love and appreciate that they couch that and wrap it softly with a lot of love and support. And so that is something for us to remember when we feel triggered or afraid or resistant to some of these shifts, is that these shifts are ultimately a good thing, and our responses to them uh, emotionally are natural, and we are held through this. So, a really beautiful message. It's one of the most beautiful channels, to me at least, I feel like I've had come through. And I hope you find it helpful. I hope you receive it with the energy in which it's intended, both by me and my guides. Um, you know, I just want to quickly say that, whatever comes through, particularly when it's a message that's meant to be a loving heads up, the intention is never that you brace for something, right? You notice how nothing that came through was about you better prepare or you better brace for that. That wasn't the energy of this at all. The energy is a loving heads up and a bit of advice about how to move through this with ease. So my hope is that that's the energy that you receive this with. Thanks for being here. I will have more messages coming in the future, and I'll see you next time. Send in some love until then.